Last episode, we established that the brain runs old programs. Today, we look at the most common one, the loop that feels like thinking but is actually worry. Here is how you know you have been in it. You spend an hour replaying a conversation. You run through every possible way something could go wrong. You tell yourself you are preparing or processing or just being thorough. And when you finally stop, the problem is exactly where it was when you started, except now you feel worse. That is not problem solving. That is the overthinking loop, and it has a very specific mechanism that research has been mapping for 30 years. Once you see that mechanism, you have a way out of it. Let us get into it. This is MindScope, where we turn the science of everyday behavior into tools you can actually use. Today, the tool is for overthinking, which the research calls rumination. By the end of this episode, you will understand why overthinking feels productive even when it accomplishes nothing. You will see what it actually does to your mood and your ability to think clearly, and you will have two concrete moves to break the loop. Neither of them is positive thinking, and neither of them asks you to simply stop worrying. They are more specific than that, and they work. Let us start with a definition, because the everyday word overthinking covers a lot of ground. The specific thing we are talking about has a precise name in psychology. It is called rumination. The clinical psychologist Susan Nolen-Hoeksema, who spent decades studying this pattern, defined rumination as repetitively focusing attention on distress and on its possible causes and consequences, without moving toward active problem solving. Read that definition slowly. It is not just thinking about a problem. It is cycling through the problem, its causes, and its consequences again and again, without reaching a decision or an action. The loop has no exit built into it. What makes this tricky is that rumination looks a lot like genuine reflection. Both are effortful. Both are focused. Both feel like you are doing something about the problem. The difference is the direction. Genuine reflection moves toward a decision, a plan, or a new understanding. Rumination cycles back to the same material without resolution. It is the difference between a conversation that reaches a conclusion and a conversation that restarts at the beginning every few minutes. And here is the key thing the research tells us. Rumination is not a failure of effort. It is actually quite effortful, which is exactly why it feels like problem solving. Your mind is working hard. It just is not going anywhere. So why does the brain do this if it does not help? The answer is uncomfortable and illuminating. Research on worry, which is the forward-looking version of rumination, imagining bad things that could happen rather than replaying things that already did, suggests that worry functions as a form of cognitive avoidance. This is the idea developed by researcher Thomas Borkovec and colleagues. The core argument is this. When something worries you deeply, the most distressing version of it is often a vivid, physical, felt sense of the threat. An image, a bodily feeling, a moment of panic. Verbal thinking, the internal monologue that overthinking runs on, suppresses that vivid emotional processing. So the mind defaults to thinking in words precisely because it keeps the full emotional experience at arm's length. Sit with that for a moment, because it reframes the whole thing. You are not thinking because you are trying to solve the problem. You are thinking because it is more bearable than feeling. The internal monologue is the escape hatch from the raw emotion underneath. This is why overthinking feels productive even when it produces nothing. It is reducing one kind of distress, the vivid, physical discomfort of the emotion, while generating a different kind, the circular exhaustion of the loop. The mind is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It is managing threat. It has just chosen a strategy that costs more than it saves. Here is the thing that should bother you now. If overthinking is your mind trying to manage something it finds threatening, then telling yourself to just stop thinking about it is not a strategy. You are asking your mind to give up its threat management system without offering it anything in return. That does not work, and we have all tested it and confirmed it does not work. The question is what actually does. Hold that, because the answer is in the next segment. Before we get to the tools, let us be honest about the stakes. Because it would be easy to hear all of this and say, fine, it is just an inefficient habit. The research says otherwise. Susan Nolen-Hoeksema's work over multiple studies showed that rumination predicts the onset of depressive episodes and makes existing low mood worse. People who ruminate when they feel low accumulate more negative thinking and are less able to move out of it. They are less likely to problem solve effectively. They are more likely to catastrophize. And the rumination itself, not just the original stressor, drives these outcomes. It is not a passive symptom of distress. It actively makes things worse. A study of people dealing with the same level of initial distress showed that those who ruminated reported significantly more negative mood over time than those who did not. Same starting point, different outcome based on what the mind did next. The loop is not neutral. Running it costs you. And the cost is not just feeling bad. Nolan Hoeksema's research also showed that ruminators generate fewer and lower quality solutions when they eventually try to address the problem. So not only does rumination not help, it actively gets in the way of the thing it pretends to be doing. Now for the tools, and here is where it gets counterintuitive again. The first technique is not about suppressing the overthinking. It is about containing it. It is called scheduled worry, and it has been tested in clinical research, including work building on Borkowicz's findings. The idea is this. When you notice the loop starting, you do not fight it. You defer it. You tell yourself, I am going to think about this, but I am going to do it at a specific time I choose, not right now. Then you name a window, perhaps 20 to 30 minutes later in the day, and you keep to it. When the worry comes back before the window, and it will, you notice it, you remind yourself the time is set, and you redirect your attention to what is in front of you. When the window arrives, you sit down with the worry intentionally. You think about the problem, write about it if that helps, and you work toward what action, if any, is actually available to you. Then you close the window. This technique does two things at once. It stops the loop from bleeding into your entire day because you have given the worry a place to go. And it changes your relationship with the content because when you engage with it deliberately rather than passively, you are more likely to reach the question that actually matters. Is there an action available to me right now? If there is, you plan it. If there is not, you name that, and you let it be. Most chronic overthinking is about things that cannot be acted on in the moment, and naming that clearly has its own calming effect. The second tool gets at the core distinction the research makes between two ways of coping: problem-focused coping and emotion-focused coping. These terms come from the classic work of Richard Lazarus and Susan Folkman. Problem-focused coping is when you direct your effort toward the actual problem, toward what can change. Emotion-focused coping is when you direct your effort toward managing the feeling the problem creates. Both are valid in the right context. The problem is that rumination pretends to be problem-focused while actually being neither. It does not change the situation. It does not process the emotion. It is a loop that sits between the two without doing either one well. So the tool is a simple two-question check when you catch yourself in the loop. First, is this a problem I can do something about right now? If yes, what is the smallest concrete action I can take, and when will I take it? Write that down and do it. If the answer is no, or not yet, then the second question applies. What am I feeling underneath this thinking? Name the emotion plainly. Anxiety, frustration, grief, loneliness. Naming an emotion directly, what researchers call labeling, has been shown to reduce its intensity. You are not fixing the problem. You are doing the correct kind of work for the kind of problem you actually have. The distinction sounds simple, and it is genuinely hard to apply in the moment. But with practice, the two-question check becomes a reflex, and it cuts the loop by forcing you to locate where you actually are. Either there is an action, or there is a feeling to name. There is rarely a good reason to keep looping. Here is the whole framework in one breath. Overthinking is not problem-solving. It is a loop your mind runs when it is trying to manage something threatening while avoiding the full emotional experience of it. It is effortful and feels purposeful, which is why it is so easy to mistake it for real work. But research shows it increases negative mood over time, it prolongs distress, and it actually makes you worse at solving the problem you are supposedly thinking about. The two tools do not ask you to think less. They ask you to think more precisely. Scheduled worry contains the loop by giving it a specific window, so it does not colonize your whole day. The two-question check cuts the loop by forcing you toward either a concrete action or an honest naming of the feeling underneath. Together, they replace circular motion with forward movement. Try one of them today. The next time you catch the loop starting, defer it to a window or ask the two questions. That is the whole experiment. One loop, one interruption, one check. If overthinking is significantly affecting your daily life or your well-being, that is worth bringing to a qualified mental health professional. Not because this framework is wrong, but because a professional can help you work with what is underneath. If this episode gave you a new way to see a loop you have been in, consider subscribing, because the next episode is on stress. Specifically, on why stress is not just a feeling but a physiological state, and what that means for how you manage it. Before you go, here is a genuine question for the comments. When you are in the overthinking loop, what does your mind tell you it is doing? Planning? Processing? Preparing? Write the exact word it uses. I want to see what the loop calls itself, because naming it is the first move toward interrupting it. I will see you in the next one.